The CD-ROM disc contains computer data that may damage your audio system. Please stop playing this disc immediately.
Hey, hands up, who remembers Cosmic Fantasy? Well, I do, because I love Nihon Telenet, and I don't care who knows it. I'll shout it from the windows.
Shut up!
Sorry.
If you're watching this video, you probably know Telenet's jazz. But if you're not an old of a certain vintage, like myself, Telenet were a pretty massive publisher slash developer back in the 80s and 90s, primarily making games for Japanese microcomputers before moving on to the Sega Genesis and NEC PC Engine. You may have played their Genesis port of Ys 3, Wanderers from Ys, or if you were a true Sega trash kid like yours truly, you played Valis. The other kids on your street all had NESs and Castlevania, but we knew, in our heart of hearts, that those Valis girls were... well, they were certainly in bikinis. Don't even get me started on Exile. I've got a whole video in me on that one. Anyway, even more elusive than the Sega Trash Kid was the TurboGrafx Dumpster Baby. Non-derogatory. It was a status that I aspired to, and one uncommon to encounter in the wild back in suburban Kansas. As a baby weeb and a JRPG sicko, it did not escape my notice that the TurboGrafx CD had a sizable library of RPGs with anime-esque cutscenes. Ys 1 and 2 was the most famous, obviously, much more visually striking than the Master System version of Ys 1 I had in my grubby little mitts, not to mention the only version of Ys 2 available in English for like another 20 years. But there was more than just Ys, generally courtesy of Victor Ireland and Working Designs. Before they achieved their controversial cult status with Lunar the Silver Star on Sega CD, Working Designs got their start on NEC's hardware, and one of their marquee games of this period was Cosmic Fantasy II, developed by Telenet's newly established CD-ROM division, Shin Nihon Lasersoft. Oh, now look at this box art. Our androgyne heroes look ready to take on their equally flamboyant nemesis through the power of jazzercise. It pains me to see Theater Kid infighting. There's enough spotlight for all of us. Check out this little cat's stinky balls, though, huh? Amazing stuff. You may have guessed that this illustration was created for the game's American release, which just barely predated the Western anime boom of the mid-1990s. It really stands in stark contrast to Lunar's American release just 1 year later, doesn't it? But questionable design aside, doesn't this box make you want to go on a Cosmic Fantasy? Well, listener, I did. I wanted to go on a Cosmic Fantasy so heckin' bad, and I wouldn't until the early 2000s when I finally managed to get my hands on a copy, back when scouring the retro game aftermarket wouldn't bankrupt you. And it was fine, I guess. Cosmic Fantasy II was a relatively bog-standard Dragon Quest clone, which in actuality wasn't very cosmic at all. You spend most of your time on the medieval planet Idea, fighting an inordinate number of random encounters, occasionally being treated to a limited animation cutscene of our hero yelling at a boat or something. It's a game where your first random encounter can go so catastrophically wrong, it'll send you back to the start of the game. I probably played about halfway through before falling off. Honestly, what I remember the most vividly is Working Design's pop culture-laden script. Haha, this chicken is talking about Thighmaster. That one works on multiple levels, and none of them make sense. Hemorrhoids? Bingleberries? What will these guys think of next? In Japan, Cosmic Fantasy had a little more cachet. This was the passion project of prolific animator Ochi Kazuhiro. Well known and well respected, over the past 40 years he's been involved in everything from the original Fist of the North Star TV show to Transformers the movie, and he's still working at the time of this video. Each Cosmic Fantasy title follows a different little adventure boy, as they usually travel through space, only to crash land on an underdeveloped fantasy planet, not unlike the aforementioned Planet Idea. Thematically, it's not too far off Star Ocean, another series with origins in Telenet via Wolf Team. The stories are pretty light and bawdy. To give you an idea of tone, this is a series with a Laserdisc OVA subtitled Lure of the Cosmic Cougar.
私に力を貸してちょうだい。そうすればあなたのことたっぷりと可愛がってあげる。ねえ。ふざけんな！
Like most of Telenet's CD-ROM output of this era, each game boasts an all-star voice cast. Takayama Minami, better known as Ace Detective Conan, or for my fellow after-school Gundam Wing teens, lead vocalist of 2Mix, voices the first game's protagonist Yu, and you'll also hear the talents of the late Tsuru Hiromi, Seki Toshihiko, and Banjo freaking Ginga, among many others. If you'd like to know more about the series as a whole, please check out Bitmap Books' Guide to Japanese Role-Playing Games, who provided me with the opportunity to recap every Cosmic Fantasy game, alongside a bunch of other games for true RPG sickos. This is not an ad, it's just a cool book, and I'm always going to shill something that I contributed to. But hey, it is what it is, and what Cosmic Fantasy is an obscure JRPG series from the early days of CD-ROM consoles. Unpreserved, ephemeral, lost in time, like tears and rain, never to be seen again. Or so we thought. In 2023, the impossible happened. Tokyo-based publisher Edia announced the Cosmic Fantasy Collection for the Nintendo Switch. Even more impossibly, they announced an English localization for release in 2024, replete with a physical edition from the folks at Limited Run Games. This collection consists of Cosmic Fantasy 1 and 2, and considering there are in fact 5 Cosmic Fantasy games, calling this the collection is a little bit rich. Edia later released a second Switch collection of the remaining 3 games in Japan, with an English release at the time of recording, scheduled for sometime in the second half of 2024. Now, this actually wouldn't be the first time that Cosmic Fantasy 1 and 2 were bundled together. In 1994, they were ported to the Mega CD as Cosmic Fantasy Stories, exclusively in Japan. Developed by Telenet division Riot instead of Lasersoft, I don't know a whole lot about this version. From what I gather, it revamps Cosmic Fantasy 1 with snazzier graphics and playable party members, but the package appears relatively disliked, with players criticizing the games for being even more grindy than they already were. Shout out to Luke Morse 1 on YouTube, who recorded this footage by pointing his camera at a CRT. I unironically love this, no joke. Now, as tempted as I was by Limited Run's release, and as much obvious care went into it, I have enough plastic in my house as is, so I logged onto the eShop to buy the digital version, and wait, they want how much for this?
なんてひどいこと。許せない。
Well, okay, that's a little bit more expensive than I bargained for, but these are 2 full-length RPGs preserved for the first time in over 30 years, not to mention the first English-language release of Cosmic Fantasy 1. That's pretty cool, right? It's not cool. It's not cool at all. These games are, quite honestly, pretty bad. Cosmic Fantasy 1 was post-Final Fantasy, post-Dragon Quest III, post-Phantasy Star, and lacked the depth of any of these games. I recognize my opinions on the games themselves are highly subjective, but this collection itself is a little lousy too. Both games received a fresh translation, and they are incredibly poor. First draft scripts littered with typos, nonsensical grammar, and sometimes flat-out incorrect information. Edia, baby, if you're going to continue to release these games in English, you need to hire some editors. This isn't going to cut it. Call me, I have reasonable rates. Script aside, there's no quality of life features like save states or fast forward, and no bonus material or curation features either, save for translated scans of each game's manual. And you will need these manuals to play each game, as they're the only place information on each game's spells appear. It'd be really nice to have a bookmark feature for the manuals instead of having to flip back and forth through dozens of pages manually, pardon the pun, but no such luck. I ended up taking screenshots as a quick reference. But sometimes the manual's also straight up wrong. Spell descriptions are frequently jumbled up, and this paragraph suggests that party members in Cosmic Fantasy II are AI controlled. But that's not true at all. There's not even an auto battle option in the second game. What gives? But whatever, I just spent £40 and 49 pence on this, and I'll be damned if I don't get my money's worth. Fasten your cosmic seatbelts, adventure kids, because you're coming with me on this one. Here we are at the very start of the saga, Cosmic Fantasy Adventure Boy U. Developed during 1989 by Lasersoft and releasing exclusively in Japan in March of 1990. The title screen is bright, lively, and completely silent. A little odd, but a notable first impression. The thing is, I've played this game before, and I feel like I would have remembered this stylistic choice. With the power of the new NEC CD-ROM, wouldn't this be the prime opportunity to dazzle your audience with a striking piece of Red Book audio? Well, that's exactly what Cosmic Fantasy did, at least on the PC Engine. The original release's title screen features Hikari no Umi no Naka e, or Into the Sea of Light, by burgeoning teen idol Nishimura Tomomi from her 1989 album Fantasy Story Christmas Album Tomorrow's Land. The back page of the Japanese manual, which is notably not included in this release, is an advertisement for the album, with a golden clip art ribbon awarding the song the prestigious status of Cosmic Fantasy theme song. There was even this little bonus mode where if you held both face buttons and pressed start at the title screen, you got a digitized message from Tomomi inviting you to her pop-up shop in Harajuku. If you hurry, you can still make it. Or at least maybe try out some of these crepe stands that she's helpfully pointed out. All trace of Nishimura Tomomi has been excised from the Cosmic Fantasy collection, so I guess the deal must have expired. Theme song no more. Which is a shame, because this is weirdly a big part of PC Engine history. Telenet were pushing Nishimura pretty hard at the time. She even got a tie-in game, Fairy Dust Story, Labyrinth of Elfane, released just a few months after Cosmic Fantasy and developed by much of the same team. I think it's safe to say we're unlikely to see a Switch port of that one. Instead, the Cosmic Fantasy II theme song, Legend of Paradise, features heavily in this package. Sung by anime session musician Yamada Yoko, I believe this one was actually commissioned for the game rather than licensed from an existing album. Honestly, it's a bit of a glow-up. Legend of Paradise is a synthy city pop banger which sounds appropriate for a space adventure, whereas Into the Sea of Light sounds like the closing ceremony at Tokyo Disneyland. Strangely, Into the Sea of Light does appear to be present on the soundtrack included with physical editions of the Cosmic Fantasy collection, so I'm not really sure what's up with that. If anybody knows for sure, do sound off in the comments. Despite its lofty status as an early CD-ROM title, Cosmic Fantasy I doesn't really make use of Red Book audio at all, exclusively using the Who C6280 PSG chip for its soundtrack, assuming in an effort to make room for its surprisingly robust amount of voice acting. But with the song's absence, the collection starts as it means to go on, allowing the player to enjoy the bleep bloops on their own terms, without Nishimura's saccharine tones haunting their memory. Enter our protagonist, Yu the Adventure Boy, proud member of the Cosmic Hunters. You can tell he's definitely a seasoned pro by the fact that he appears to be 10 years old and he's wearing a baby bonnet shaped like a funny animal. Responding to an SOS call, Yu's spaceship, the Algernon, hits a mine camouflaged as an asteroid, sending him crashing to the surface of planet Norg. Supporting him is Matron, his motherly navigation system, and Monmo, a talking green otter who's also a motorcycle. I think Yu's hat is styled after Monmo's head, but nobody ever brings it up. It'd be like if I just turned up for work like this one day and didn't say anything about it. You can look at a photo of his deceased parents and reflect on their legacy. He's so lanky in his dad's arms, like a teenager who's asking to be held like a baby.
を継いできっとこの銀河系の平和を守り抜いてみせます。母さん、父さんと一緒に僕を見守っていてください。
Right off the bat, the quality of these voice samples are pretty good. Clear as a bell, though this won't always be the case, as minor characters tend to have their voice samples compressed to save space.
そこで君にモルガンを退治してもらいたいのだ。引き受けてくれるな。
I decided to see what kind of display options Edia included, and check out this horrid widescreen. Please don't use this. Let's check out the game's UI next. Cosmic Fantasy has two menus. There's this small menu you access with the B button, which manages our items and equipment. And then there's this full screen menu accessed via the select button, where we can check our stats, load an earlier save, view a very unhelpful map, or talk to our companions. I talked to Monmo, who encourages me to leave the baddies to him, but he actually doesn't lift a fender in combat, so he can pipe the heck down. At first, I thought the talk option was sort of a party chat a la Phantasy Star 4 to recap events and nudge the player in the right direction if they need a hint on what to do next. But I think it's actually just to show off the CD-ROM-ROM's audio chops. You and Monmo's voice clips remain unchanged throughout the game's duration, and other characters who join basically just spout a greeting in line with their personality.
ありがとう。
So, our first order of business is to find somebody who can help us. Fortunately, our crash site is just outside of Bana village. Hopefully they won't burn you and his motorcycle at the stake. This moody music sounds like we're trying to sneak down to the kitchen for some cookies after lights out, and it signals that all is not well in town. This grown woman says she can't go out and play because of kobolds, and Frowny Fred here is equally worried about King Kobold, the king of the kobolds. The village elder, completely unconcerned that an unsupervised child crashed from the heavens in technology this world has never seen, asks us to take care of the kobolds. His sprite is bald, bearded, and dressed like a Shingon Buddhist monk, but his portrait has a full head of hair, no beard, and he's depicted wearing a jerkin. I feel gaslit. This is not a spacefaring fish-out-of-water story like Star Ocean. Being stranded on planet Norg is just another day on the job for you, and not a single person cares that he's essentially an alien with a talking motorcycle. It's a wasted opportunity, and makes one wonder why we're crossing sci-fi and fantasy settings in the first place if nobody cares to remark on it. Just then, another guy teleports in to raise the alarm. The kobolds are attacking. And then we get attacked in town. Not by kobolds, but by an egg in a cube. This is a pretty good time for us to talk about combat, so let's camp out on this a little bit. This is a very simplistic Dragon Quest-style battle system, as was the style at the time. Combat takes place against a mostly black backdrop, with this cute little rectangular peephole depicting a rendition of the current area. Currently, Yu has no spells and can either attack with his equipped weapon, or pull out a handgun and shoot his opponent in the freaking face. More powerful than a melee attack, you only have 15 bullets, and opportunities to replenish them are rare, so it's best to save your ammo for when you really need it. Pretty basic stuff, and fair play to an RPG which starts out with the essentials before increasing in complexity as the game continues, but in Cosmic Fantasy's case, that complexity never really comes. Most of the fights, of which there are many, only allow you to trade physical blows back and forth until one side goes down. At level 3, Yu learns his first spell, Burn. I try to cast it, and I get a message about love and courage, but nothing happens. I can do this repeatedly with no result, and then I see that I have 0 MP. Okay. Consulting the manual, you can only use spells, or psychokinetic abilities, when the scenario dictates that he can. Usually when he witnesses an atrocity, or when a bad guy makes him really, really steamed. It's an arbitrary and bad system that leaves the player with very few strategies for most of the game, and one which was correctly discarded after this first entry. Even when you do gain the ability to cast offensive spells, they're rarely, if ever, more powerful than your melee attacks. You do gain a suite of buff, debuff, and ailment spells, some of which are useful, but come at such a high MP cost with an equally high chance of failure. I found it best to save my MP for healing, which was also ridiculously costly. There's a whole host of different items you can collect and use in combat, and it's hard to determine what a lot of them do. I mean, okay, I get that herbs are for healing, antidotes are for detoxing, and guns are for shooting, but what the heck does this magic broom do? I tried this in about a dozen different scenarios, and the answer seems to be nothing. The manual doesn't include a list of items, and while stores do allow you to read an item's description, many items, like this broom, can't be found in stores. So if you're a Cosmic Fantasy magic broom expert, please sound off in the comments. At one point I find a softball in a chest. I try it out, hoping I can beam this fireball right in his stupid head, but instead I get a message that I'm no longer itchy. That's great news. I believe this is actually a cure for paralysis, which never ended up being too much of a problem for me. Later on, I find a beer bottle, which does the exact same thing. You'll also notice that the battle messages are garbled. This text informs us that Great Spider slashes at you, but in actuality the reverse is true. This is not a good localization. If you die in Cosmic Fantasy, you are sent back to the last inn you visited as Monmo wakes you up and tells him he was having a nightmare. You may think this is the old Dragon Quest back to town with half your gold death, but this is in fact an unceremonious load of your last saved game. This can be devastating, and we'll talk about that more later. With the egg cracked and the cube diced, I refuse to help the mayor, but thou must. The kobolds are in Border Forest to the northeast. We get a little bit of event experience and gold for our trouble. I do like these inn and shopkeeper portraits. Check out this glowing wine bottle and this sponge on the counter. I buy a herb and an antidote each, which runs me about 18 gold. And that's Bane. No equipment to buy, so you and Monmo take their butts northeast to battle the kobold menace. That is, if I can stop accidentally stepping back into town. Seemingly I can't. We meander over to the Border Forest, populated by green kobolds, probably evolved to blend in with the foliage. Notice that these treasure chests only use a single static sprite, whether you've looted them or not, making it a little tough to keep track of where you've already searched. Cutscenes aside, this is not a good-looking game by 1990 standards. This is a multi-floor forest, separated by staircases, because nature finds a way. We meet King Kobold, a red dog in silver armor and a golden helmet. He asks if I'm looking for him. I say no, and he says he's going to eat me anyway. So we enter our first boss battle. Look at his little snapping mouth. We trade blows. He's tougher than his subjects, and I have to eat a herb, but he goes down in a couple of turns. He asks me to forgive him. I do, and he calls me an idiot, which kind of hurts my feelings. But just then, a glamorous androgyne figure appears from nowhere and kills the kobold. This is Sylph, warrior of the wind. They seem to know that we're not from this planet, as if it wasn't already obvious. Mysteriously telling us that we'll meet again one day, we find ourselves back on the world map. The music in town is now upbeat, and the townsfolk all say thanks and not much else. Not even the Elder has anything more for me. But I do learn that the neighboring town of Pennet seems to be under attack too. I don't know which way Pennet is, so after buying a few more herbs and antidotes with the coins I pilfered from the kobolds, I make a guess and point myself west. It's the wrong way, so I head north and continue going in the wrong direction. It's a good time to mention there's also a Monmo button in the menu. This is a fast travel ability with this cute little image of you riding Monmo as he makes motorcycle sounds with his mouth. It got me away from my lengthy detour of going the wrong way without having to deal with random encounters. From henceforth, Cosmic Fantasy treads similar grounds to its genre contemporaries. Go from town to town, hear their woes, then head to the local dungeon to beat up the monster of the week. Characters join the party from time to time, but like Monmo, they're non-combatants here to solely drive the plot along. We eventually meet a true second party member, but that's still a ways off, so we'll get to that later. Here in Pennet, Yu challenges an immortal cave-dwelling Yeti who's been eating the village's menfolk. Look at him point and giggle at us. He won't be laughing long, because Yu harnesses the mutual love of a father-son duo to save the day. One of the central characters we encounter around this time is Nyan, the kitty cat man. A money-grubbing interstellar merchant, Yu and Nyan are very familiar with each other. Monmo remarks that whenever Yu is in a tough spot, Nyan always shows up to sell him a solution. And meeting Nyan feels a little strange. Cosmic Fantasy doesn't do a great job of selling this as a pre-established relationship, glossing over things quickly as if the audience was already expected to know who he was, giving this disorienting feeling that this isn't a series' inaugural entry, but an adaptation of a larger franchise. Nyan is something of a mascot for the series, and why wouldn't he be? He shows up throughout the game to sell us stuff. Bombs, healing potions, ammo clips, bazookas, all of it prohibitively expensive. One of his wares is the Heavy Barrier, which purports to nullify damage about 15% of the time. That's not a great rate, but it sounds useful, so I save up to buy it and equip it, and it never works. Not once. The rube that I am, I even traded in for a better, more expensive model late in the game, and that one doesn't work either. Thanks, Nyan. Next, we befriend a dandy fop named Lloyd, who offers to introduce you to the King of the Planet. But before that, we stop at Tickle, a town in the midst of a pandemic. Pippo, the forest elf, can save the people, but she needs our help gathering some primrose first. Actually, look at her ears. Tiny for an elf, like the artist had to stop and go to the bathroom halfway through drawing them.
Political correctness. Cancel culture を発動中. Cancel culture を発動中.
Standing between us and the primrose is this horrible dentata flower. Yu's not angry enough to cast spells, so it's melee attacks and gunshots for me, all of which do scratch damage. I get my otter hat handed to me, and this is where I first encountered the grind. I cannot emphasize how brutal Cosmic Fantasy's grind is. I spend about an hour fighting my way up another 3 levels, an accomplishment which takes roughly 30 to 40 battles per level. And even at this point, I'm just barely surviving a standard random encounter. I've got virtually no verbs or strategies at my disposal other than smacking and whacking on the monsters in front of me. This game truly expects you to go rest at the inn after every 1 or 2 battles, and it all takes forever. I grind up another 2 levels, and a fight with a turtle still leaves me close to death, and that's when I'm fully kitted out with the latest and greatest equipment. As I make my arduous death march to the next level, I find myself questioning my life choices and why I know so much about Cosmic Fantasy instead of something like calculus. Sometimes the monsters are fun to look at least. This dryad looks like a cake. Look at this puppet. Riding Monmo back to town is an easy way to heal and save without dying, but things aren't so easy in dungeons. Eventually I learn a spell which purports to teleport you outside of dungeons, but it seems to work only in very specific locations, which is almost never when I actually need it. Hi, Future Bobby here. As it turns out, I forgot to capture footage of the Escape from Dungeon Magic failing to work, so I went to load an old save to capture some new footage of that, and the Cosmic Fantasy 1 collection had unceremoniously and without my knowledge erased all of my save data for Cosmic Fantasy 1. So do watch out for that one if you're planning to play this collection for yourself. However, it is around this point that I discover if you take a single step at a time, you'll completely avoid random battles. Cosmic Fantasy is a programming wonder from top to bottom, but I'm thankful for this slow-moving mercy, which got me out of a lot of sticky situations from here to the finish line. Even with all this experience I gained, I still can't deal with this flower. So I go back to Nyan and peruse his goodies for a hand-up. I purchase a couple of super bombs, self-explanatory, and something called a slime ball, which purports to splosh your foe in slime and cause them to spend the next few turns unable to attack as they clamber out of the mess you made. Naturally, the slime ball doesn't work at all, but 2 super bombs are enough to take out the flower once and for all. Who knew? We're gifted a tent as a reward for stopping the pandemic. I pitch it up in the overworld, and not only does it heal me, but it also saves the game. I'll never have to use an inn again. Or so I thought. It's a one-time use, and I've just wasted it, and I can't even reload my save because the tent overwrote my previous save without asking me if I wanted to do that. Fortunately, the next town sells tents right in the general store, but they cost an arm and a leg, and I've got neither to spare. You may have noticed there's not really much overarching plot for this game. There's a popular fairy tale about the witch Morgan, who once tried to conquer the entire planet, only to be defeated by the brave warrior Titanus, riding a dragon and wielding the sword Grand Caliber. An obvious nod to King Arthur and Morgan Le Fay. Maybe a bit of Midsummer Night's Dream, with Titanus sounding like a gender-swapped Titania, and maybe a dash more misogyny. I don't know, I don't like the standard evil witch plot presented verbatim. But most of the time, things just meander along until we meet the king of the planet. Here we are in his castle. This place is full of knights in short shorts, all marching in place. The knight tells me this castle has no hidden basement, which seems suspiciously specific, but I hunt around and I can't find one. That's a little mean, but it's probably a jokey reference to an early Dragon Quest or something that I didn't catch. Anyway, the king informs us that the legend of Morgan is true. Morgan's back from the dead, and we can only stop her with the help of Titanus' descendant. This brings us to our second and final playable party member. This is Saya, the little girl who everybody loves, and who looks exactly like another Telenet character, Rumi from Exile. We're introduced to her at the lake, where you and Monmo peep at her bare butt cheeks. I get the impression this colored a lot of the positive reception this game received in its heyday. In true anime style, Saya catches us peeping and blows us up with a spell. She's quick to forgive, though, and joins the party with minimal persuasion. She starts out at level 1. She's holding no items, no equipment, and has attack and defense values of 0 each. This is a lot to deal with. But let's talk a little bit about Saya before we continue. She's a mage, and quite a fragile one at that. She learns offensive, healing, and support abilities, all of which are relatively costly, but unlike you, she can use her magic at any time. It's certainly nice to have some extra verbs, as well as an extra target to spread the damage received. Interestingly, Saya can't die, at least not in the way that you'd expect. If Saya takes mortal damage, her hit points stay at 1, and Yu tells her to get behind him for safety. Saya is effectively dead in this state, and cannot take action, unless Yu heals her, which returns her to the battlefield. Conversely, if Yu dies, it's game over, even if Saya has full health. I suspect this is because Lasersoft didn't know how to program a battle party of greater than 1, which, okay. I try out Saya's Badam spell, the explosive attack she used on Yu and Monmo when they were peeping, and it does scratch damage, so I guess it's time for more grinding. Look at her dang walk cycle. Her little hands flip back and forth as she minces across the field. And Yu's walking on her head. But hey, look, Saya's been added to the Monmo animation. That is pretty cool. With a few extra levels under her belt, Saya learns some more spells. Bogdam, this all-target version of Badam, is just as weak as its single-target counterpart, but she does learn a few useful abilities. Noram cuts an enemy's defense in half, effectively allowing you to inflict double damage, but it doesn't always work. Another spell, Ruma, is described in the manual as a petrification spell, but this battle text suggests it actually puts an enemy to sleep. It's still a useful ability, as it persists through attacks and wears off over time, so I suppose the petrification sleep dissonance is more to do with the language than the actual effect. Wait a second. This text says that Dega and Ruma are both single-target petrification spells, but one is incredibly more expensive than the other. Did they just copy the description for Dega into Ruma? Well, since I lost my save, I guess we'll never know. At level 15, Saya learns the spells Bit and Holliber. Great name, sounds like a buddy cop duo. Bit doubles the party's agility, while Holliber confuses foes. Supposedly. I'm not certain if either of these spells actually work. But with a wider grimoire, we have a leg to stand on against the world map's killer turtles and their monkey friends. Most importantly, Saya's presence gives us 9 more inventory spots to load up with herbs and some of those MP restoring smelling mints. I try to buy her some equipment, but we get this poorly translated message which tries to tell us she can't equip a particular weapon or article of clothing, and manages to fail spectacularly at getting that across. This is a great time to mention that you cannot trade items or equipment between party members. Cosmic Fantasy II mercifully allows you to trade items, but the equipment issue persists. Now, this is a problem for a number of reasons. Firstly, you may have guessed that both of these games are deeply unserious about their RPG mechanics, and as such, equipment stats are not detailed in the game nor the manual. The only way to determine if a piece of equipment is better or worse than the one you're currently wearing— oops, just crashed the game. Hang on a second. There we go. The only way to determine if a piece of equipment is better or worse than the one you're currently wearing is to equip it and observe the numerical change in the status screen. Turns out that expensive new shield you just bought for you isn't quite as good as the one he's currently holding. Well, Saya could probably use it, but you'll have to sell it back at a loss and buy one at full price specifically for her. It's nothing a little save scumming can't get around, but the same can't be said of weapons and armors you find in treasure chests or receive as quest rewards. You need to pick which party member will forever hold it right away, with no indication if you've made the right choice. This is complicated further in Cosmic Fantasy II, a game which has multiple party members who cycle in and out as the story progresses. Better hope you didn't just give a valuable sword to somebody who's about to disappear in 5 minutes. The inability to trade items ends up biting me in the butt, too. Late in the game, Saya gets stoned by Medusa, the bad kind of stoned. She has a de-stone spell, but she can't use it when petrified. The inn doesn't heal it, and this sauna just shows us her cleavage, but also doesn't heal it. The item shop doesn't have anything that will heal it either. I tried this elixir, it doesn't work. I can't even access Saya's inventory while she's petrified. Out of options, I travel the world in search of a store that has what I need, and eventually I find one way back. I de-stone Saya, and infuriatingly she has 3 anti-petrification items in her inventory, which I couldn't access. Good job, Cosmic Fantasy. If you get stoned, it's an instant game over, so Saya shouldn't even be carrying these. So all I can do is sell them off and buy them again for you. Back to the main plot. From this point onwards, the war against Morgan is afoot, as you and Saya travel the world to fight her 4 generals, each of whom is associated with a different element. You've played RPGs before, you know the ones. They are, in order, Gaia of Earth, a big man in underwear, unmistakably voiced by Banjo Ginga. He's slaughtered the king's men, and only you can reunite the ghost of a brave soldier with his lady love. Jill of Flame, inexplicably a frog lady disguised as a dashing lady knight. She's kidnapped the princess and forced her into an iron mask because she hates beauty. For some reason, Jill is the one wearing the iron mask in battle, I think due to a miscommunication with the enemy sprite artist. Neela of Water, a witch causing droughts throughout the land. Check out the animation of her cloak blowing around. That's that sumptuous Telenet animation I know and love. Absolutely can't get enough of it. She makes you fight this endless battle against her mooks. I was too stupid to realize this is meant to be unwinnable, and I spent more time than I'd like to admit in this bit, in fear of being sent back to my last saved game. Neela kidnaps Saya and freezes her in a block of ice at one point, leading to this extended, aggravating segment in which your battle verbs have been stripped from you yet again. And last but not least, it's Sylph of Wind. You remember Sylph, right? The guy who saved our bacon way back at the beginning of the game? It's okay if you don't, but if you do, you probably saw this coming from his name alone. With his ambiguous actions and stunning hair, you'd know he's going to turn out to be some kind of edgy anti-hero. He keeps threatening to kill us, and we do have a single unwinnable battle against him before he sacrifices himself for the greater good out of respect for Yu's manliness or something.
私たちは良い友人になれそうだね。
シルヴ僕たちは今までだっていい友達だったさ。
As we journey to stop Morgan and her generals, we climb this phallic tower, visit a town called Ziggurat that doesn't have a ziggurat in it, fight a pharaoh who's accidentally been localized as Farah. We earn the respect of the dragon people, gaining dragon friends and the Grand Caliber in the process. And peep at Saya at the hot springs. Again and again, and as many times as you'd like, really. I like the music in this penis tower, with the stupid little percussion that's woefully off time signature. Feels a little witch housey. This guy's complaining about 3% tax. Buddy, that's a utopia. This guy, who looks like Mephistopheles dressed as a stage magician, is Duke Doran of Doran Hall. He turns into a giant bat and kidnaps the princess we rescued from Jill, damseling her twice, even though he already had the king's blessing to marry her. He takes her to a rock-paper-scissors themed dungeon, and we have to get her back. I suspect the gimmick here is to follow the hands that beat each other to reach the exit, but that doesn't actually work, and I think it's just trial and error. I don't know why Batman's house is themed this way. But we kick his butt and get this wedding cutscene. Look at this great 2-frame clapping animation. I really like that. Eventually, Yu becomes a bit of a beast, at least when he's pissed off enough to use his psychic powers. Detect, which is described as an enemy scan/analysis ability, not unlike Final Fantasy's Libra, actually allows you to land a critical hit on your next turn. It's pretty expensive for a single turn boost, though. Saya begins to hold her own as well. I find an Ice Rod, a weapon which casts all target blizzard magic for free every time she attacks. This makes her a viable melee fighter and allows me to save her MP for buffs and healing. I make a quick inventory of her offensive magic anyway. She's got 2 spells, Gigafim and Boldane. Both are all target blizzard spells, which both do 50 damage to all enemies. Not only is this weaker than the Ice Rod, they're exactly the same, except one costs 7 MP and the other costs 10 MP. It's a mess, and I really don't know what they were going for here. Cosmic Fantasy 1 starts to become a little unstable at this point, too, freaking out when transitioning between field, combat, and status screens. Kind of fun, but what's less fun are the soft locks, which are becoming more and more common. I suspect these are issues with the original game, and, well, at least they're preserved in their entirety. Check out this jerk who tells me to hurry up and finish the game. Buddy, I'm trying. Here we are on Morgan's Island, where we have to pass through a lengthy cave before reaching the castle itself. We're stuck here, but Nyan will heal us for free, allow us to save our game, and loads us up with an endless number of free panaceas, which fully restores a character's HP and MP. Not a bad deal. It's pretty awful in here, even with all the grinding I done did. You're usually fighting 3 foes at a time, and if they all gang up on you, well, I guess it's back to your last save. Here at the top of the castle is this big lady statue. It's Morgan! Sylph tells us to use Grand Caliber. Yu screams, Morgan decries Sylph for betraying her, saying he'll die too, and we enter battle with this massive stone Morgan. She can do double attacks, up to 120 damage per turn, and it's a really bad scene. She yells at us during battle in text, the first foe to do this. It's a little bit of added drama that's not unappreciated. We beat her without too much difficulty, and she crumbles. Was it a robot in disguise? No, it's a ghoul with empty eye sockets. Well, here we are round 2 with Morgan. And this form's also a bit of a non-issue. We beat her and everybody celebrates, but Sylph says bye-bye because he's a homunculus of Morgan's power. He says you'll be buddies if he's born again, but Yu says you're already buddies and sheds a manly tear. Morgan's castle crumbles, we ride Monmo to safety, and we fly off on a dragon as Morgan's Island sinks below the waves. look at this peaceful cutscene. Look at Nyan's messed up proportions. Well, say hello to the space pirate Bacchus and his secret submarine rising from the sea. He's used Nemesis, but like Nyan before him, it really feels like we're supposed to know who this guy is. Well, here's a twist. Bacchus revived Morgan to take over Norg, not because he wanted to rule an entire planet, but because he knew that you would answer the SOS call and wanted to lure him here to kill him. This is an unearned and nonsensical development, and it really feels like the game should have ended by now. But I can't deny it, this fantasy has finally turned cosmic. We make contact with the Algernon for the first time since the game's start, and we tackle this submarine Death Star trench run style. We probably could have just waded out into the water, but it wouldn't have been as dramatic. And this place absolutely sucks. Look at this maze. Robots and space ninjas attack. They look like Proto Man with the big yellow scarf. They hit hard, but dole out a lot of EXP. Grinding is still a necessity, although it is slightly faster here. The escape spell finally works, allowing us to teleport back to Matron in an instant for healing and saving. Each floor of the submarine sees us refight the game's previous bosses, rebuilt like the $6 million Kobold. Here's Bacchus. We make quick work of him, but then he transforms! Fearsome! He's, what is this, a satyr with butterfly antenna and eagle wings? Butterfly Bacchus is a tough customer, taking multiple turns and really wailing on you and Saya. Saya's defense up spell successfully halves the damage of most of his attacks, except for this big one, which always does 100 damage per turn. I run out of panaceas and MP, and he absolutely trounces me, sending me back to Matron and wiping my progress through this entire gauntlet. And you know what? I don't need this. There's a cutscene code for anybody who doesn't need this either. I enter it on the title screen, which is just holding every button at the same time. Saya and you hug and blast off. Nyan gets left behind on the planet. The ship grabs him, and we get the ending song in space. The credits are very awkwardly subtitled. I do like this music, though. Then at the end, there's an invoice from Nyan. Oh, hey, some goofy pictures with untranslated character bios, too, because the localizers didn't expect anybody to get this far. Here's you in the shower. This adventure boy is 14 years old and 48.5 kilos, standing tall at 5'1". Here's Saya in a towel, and she's 16, and here's her 3 sizes. Monmo's head is open, and Nyan is getting stripped naked for taking photos of everybody in the shower. I'd be hard-pressed to call Cosmic Fantasy an enjoyable experience. Its character designs and limited animation cutscenes are no doubt striking, but its story and characters are severely lacking in depth and cohesion. Coupled with the thoughtless copying of Dragon Quest's homework, Cosmic Fantasy does little to set itself apart from its genre contemporaries. In retrospect, it now makes total sense why Working Design skipped over localizing the first entry in favor of its sequel, but it's good to know firsthand. Oh right, the sequel! That's in here too! That's gotta fare better, right? Released 1 year later in 1991, Cosmic Fantasy II is set on another medieval planet, this time the aforementioned planet Idea, where protagonist Van spends his days on Clan Island, shouting, jumping, and playing around, much to the chagrin of his girlfriend Larla? Alright. When Dark Wizard Garum kidnaps Larla to further his evil ambitions, Van finds he needs to stop goofing off and grow up quickly, embarking on a journey to save the woman he loves. We are front-loaded with voice-acted cutscenes here, much more dynamic and higher in quality than its predecessor. This time the sequel is all Red Book audio, all the time. The trade-off here is that there's considerably fewer cutscenes and far less voice acting than its predecessor, likely to make room for all of the music. You're not limited to 1 or 2 characters this time. Van is rarely on his lonesome, as party members cycle in and out with the story, up to a maximum of 4. He's also more versatile than you. Being an IDEA native, he has innate talent for magic. While this does allow for more options than whack, 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 magic still has a pretty high price with little returns. Check out this late-game all-target spell, which does 20 damage to each enemy. Absolutely useless. You can observe that battles are overlaid right atop the screen this time, rather than transitioning. Once you have more than a single party member, you have to select them manually in the battle menu. Actions are executed as soon as commands are input, and your characters can act in the order of your choice, which can be useful. Say, if you want to restore a character's MP so they're able to heal or buff the party on the same turn. Also, if you revive a dead character, they can also act again before your turn is over. Funnily enough, you can revive with any healing action, or even a status restoring item like an antidote. In the case of the latter, the character in question will still have 0 HP, but they are revived and treated as if they have a single hit point. This actually got me out of a few scrapes. Characters who've already acted aren't removed from character selection, so if you're impatient like me, you'll keep trying to mash through the menu to no avail, causing the game to beep, beep, beep away while offering no results. We press start and we're dumped unceremoniously in town. Cosmic Fantasy II isn't the best looking game, especially compared to its contemporaries, but it's quite the glow up from the first game. Van can move in 8 directions as opposed to 4, and he moves at a pretty good clip too. Regrettably, the controls are a little slippy and feel bad on the Joy-Con. There's just one status menu this time, with multiple pages. It's still not very easy to navigate, and the sound effects are pretty ear-searing. No party chat this time, which was pretty useless anyway, and opening the status menu makes the Red Book audio restart. Probably something to do with the loading this image of Van's screaming face. The music stops entirely if you request item details in the shop screen. Van is seen as something of a joke by his fellow villagers. Love or hate Working Design's cheeky script, we can see that this localization is also a mess, with commas rendered as question marks. Larla tells us to stop goofing off and get to work, so without any other ideas, I head out onto the world map. The game takes over here and automatically walks Van over to the giant Shura tree, where he reminisces about his childhood declaration of romance to Larla, carving their names into this tree trunk. As Van is in his reveries, the village of Wham explodes! I open the map to try and figure out where this place is, and, well, good luck figuring this out. But naturally, it's not that hard to find. I do dig the bouncy world map music, though. Wham is absolutely wrecked, although there appear to have been few casualties. The village elder tells us this is the work of an evil wizard named Wisdom. Okay. On behalf of Lord Garum. Sounds like they're after the princess of the planet, who's known to wear a magical pendant. Van has a brainwave. Larla wears a weird pendant. We race back home, and you can tell the place is under siege due to the random battles and the silly hand-clap percussion battle theme, even though these chickens and men are still casually strolling about. There's an enemy soldier in front of the Elder's house, and man, if I know Cosmic Fantasy, I'm gonna die immediately in this battle, a penalty which, like the first game, sends you back to your last save, so I'd better grind first. I gain a couple of levels and save at the inn, donated by this IH sign, which I think means I Hotel. Time to challenge the boss, a knight in a skirt rocking out to a synth organ remix of Flight of the Bumblebee. I try defending just to see how effective it is, and the boss ends up doing more damage than on turns where I just attack. So that's probably not going to be helpful. Van doesn't know any spells at this stage of the game, so there's not a lot you can do other than trade blows and smoke herbs when your health gets low. It takes a number of turns, but I do prevail. We win no experience and no gold, which I think is true of every boss in this game. Van rushes to Larla's aid as she's loaded onto a big old boat. Wisdom, the blue lady, challenges us and kicks our butts in a single blow before hitting us with the Ojo-sama laugh. The boat shoves off, and we're shoved into the mud. We're rescued by Uba, Larla's adoptive father. See, turns out 16 years ago, when Larla was born, Uba was her loyal retainer. The wizard Darba warned the king how special Larla was, with powers capable of ending the world. However, that power can only be harnessed by the man who takes her hand in marriage. It's a pretty sexist fantasy. Anyway, if an evil dude marries Larla, we're all screwed. The king, not knowing what to do, sent her to live as a commoner, where she became the girl Van grew up with. He didn't bother to change her name, though, which is probably how Garam found her so easily. And so, Van sets off to touch base with Larla's dad and the wizard Darba in an effort to figure out what to do next. Cosmic Fantasy II is split into a handful of parts, 4 discrete chapters according to the manual. The first chapter follows Van's journey to defeat Garam, following similar progression to the first game. Go to town, solve town's problem, conquer the dungeon, repeat. The story's pretty cheeky, even without the working design script. This guy's hiding down a well because he's cheating on his wife. Van makes his first friend in Annie the Mage, apprentice to Darba, who falls in love with us at first sight because, of course, she does. Annie specializes in support and healing. She joins at a lower level than Van, but seeing his characters get a full restore whenever they level up, this allows us to exploit her healing spells with regular free MP refills as she grows, at least for a little while. With Annie in tow, we traverse an underwater tunnel that takes us from Clan Island to the mainland. She goes off ahead to see Darba, leaving Van alone, even though we were going to the same place. Oh well. And right off the bat, the continent is a waking nightmare, filled with demons, ambulatory vines, flying eyeballs, and a testicle with teeth called Vor. There's this conspicuous waterfall where a voice tells us to come back in 20 years. That's oddly specific. We arrive at the King of the Planet's castle. He's sick, and he's really sad that he has no heir. Sounds like he messed up pawning Larla off. The nobles say the king will be happy to meet a boy like Van because he has no children. What the hell does that mean? Anyway, he gives us his ceremonial sword and sends his best swordsman, Jan, to travel with us. I guess this is now Van and Jan's big adventure. Despite his reputation, Jan forgot to bring a sword with him, and I have to go buy him one. Jan is purely a melee character, and Van won't learn any spells until he meets Darba, so you'll both be whackin' and whackin' and whackin'. Although, lacking in depth, the extra pair of hands is very much appreciated. On the way to meet Darba, we end up in an illusory village, held captive by an ancient demon. We join forces with another mage, this time named Sarah, who I think might actually be male. We enter this very purple cave, and the encounter rate is a lot, you guys. It is a whole lot. It never lets up from here, and if anything, it just gets worse. It's not an unusual occurrence to have a battle every 1 or 2 steps. You can almost hear the record scratch in the Red Book audio. We fight the demon, who might not even be a demon at all, but just a bunch of standard enemies, most of whom do 0 damage to my party. This happens time and time again in Cosmic Fantasy II, where the plot dictates an encounter, but the resources just aren't there to make it particularly memorable. Uh-oh, Sarah's in trouble with his wife, because she's about to have a baby and he was busy getting trapped by demons. Oh well, he stays home, and we head off to Darba's sanctuary, where Jan heads off home too, his escort mission complete. Annie's here, and we get some exposition from Darba. Garam was once his best pupil, but turned his designs to world domination and went off to seek Larla. Darba opted not to stop him because he was proud of his talent, I guess? Alright. Darba offers to teach Van magic, but only if we retrieve some sacred water on the other side of the world. Annie rejoins to help out, and she's lost a number of the levels I grinded out for her. I'm feeling a little foolish here, and I get ready to grind some more. Check out these accessories in the equipment shop. Taklin, Zelt, really terrible names. Supposedly these grant protection against elemental attacks, but I don't think this game has any elemental attacks. Monsters just attack, 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 and no matter what accessory I have equipped, I've never observed any difference in resistance. Still, I'm superstitious, so I outfit the party anyway. And it's kind of funny that the game is roasting me for this, but it doesn't make combat any easier. With Annie at our side, along with Viola the singing mage, we traverse the continent, dive deep into the dungeons, visit a compound of Bohemian artists, and learn that the sacred water was the pool in Darba's basement all along. We have to walk all the way back, and I feel like somebody just played a really nasty prank on me. Now, what frustrates me about this in particular is that this quest did not drive the story forward in any meaningful way. I do not mind if a subplot ends up being somewhat circular and you end up back where you started, but there was no reason for this. Yeah, your RPG needs content, but like the Bohemian artists could have given us the water, or they could have sent us somewhere else to find it. At the very least, Darba could have had a decent explanation as to why we were sent all over before returning to give him the item he held all along. So we're sent to another cave to receive the blessing of the goddess, where flowers and Minotaur attack us. Flowers are tougher than the Minotaur. We're blessed by the goddess, and she gives us her magic rod. Now, you'd think this would be a weapon for Annie, but she's about to run off in 2 seconds, so you should actually give it to Van. It's got the most attack power of all the weapons you've seen so far. In my case, a single point higher than the sword he was currently wielding, but that's better than nothing. Back at Darba's, he praises Van and compares him to Garum, which is really weird. He dies of old age, but gives us this magical stone with a picture of a mudflap girl inside it. Annie stays behind, and aren't you glad you kept the goddess staff for yourself? Well, Van's alone again, dragging out each plentiful encounter even longer. Oh boy, what are these things? Gerda, a big face, a gargoyle, a shield? In the next town, we learn about Diggin. Sounds like he once worked for the king, but now he's become some kind of Fist of the North Star style warlord, raiding this town for giggles. I walk into this house where a soldier thanks a man for installing a warp device and then says he's gonna kill him as a reward. We defeat the soldier, who's actually a centipede, and we meet Joshua. He was told he could work on interplanetary research, but in fact he was just forced to make a warp that makes raids on town easier. Josh offers to warp us to Garum's castle, but only if we beat up Diggin for him. Here in the pub, there's a depressed guy named Alan. He's sad that Diggin kidnapped his girlfriend Loris. Diggin and Loris sitting in a tree. D-I-G-G-I-N-G. He won't even come to her aid because some guys stole his bow. We have to get it back for him, at which point he's rejuvenated and comes along for the ride.
Can I ask you something?
Well, check out this ping pong path. Man, if I was stationed at this fort, I would be pissed. The place is full of ghosts, skeleton warriors, and mud monsters, more unlikely allies. We find Diggin, who makes a really untoward comment about Alan's girlfriend. He attacks, and he's the same sprite as the first boss. Diggin goes down in about 3 turns without saying another word, relinquishing a key card. Van has to hold it, not Alan, and I have to throw away an inventory item to make room for it, and then it's immediately used and discarded before we take another step. Man. I check out the warp device on top of the fortress, but we need Joshua to activate it. You guessed it, we gotta travel all the way back to town, then all the way back to the top of the fortress with Joshua in tow. We take him back up to the tippy top, and we're teleported into a jail cell. With Loris! Alan's thrilled to be reunited with his love, and Loris saw Larla being taken away by a creepy woman. Alan says it's time to take down Garum, but dumbass Van refuses and says he wants to fight him alone. These bars disappear when we talk to Alan, and they reappear when we're done. I think it's because of portraits and sprites and transparency layers. Joshua destroys the bars for us, and here we are, alone in Garum's castle. Battles thankfully aren't too challenging, but we don't even get the satisfaction of watching number go up, as the experience curve has risen almost vertically. Time for a rematch with Wisdom. No longer an unwinnable battle, it's still a slugfest as we just trade punches back and forth. Oh, there's Garum with Larla at his side. What a fancy guy he is. Four Eyes has 2 pairs of glasses on, looking like he got lost on the way to a Valis game. Van loses his dang mind, and we're absolutely trounced. Look at the blood flying from his body as he falls. Garum opts not to kill Van, though, instead sending him to the end of space-time, which is 20 years into the future.
時空の果てに飛ばしてくれよ。そしてその目でこの星の未来の姿を見るがいい。このガラム様に支配された素晴らしい世界をな。
With the first chapter closed, we cut to space, where a lady's taking a shower, for that cosmic fantasy sleaze you've all been waiting for. This is Cosmic Hunter Rim. Rim.
Rick-a-tick-a-tick-tock, tick-tock-tock. Ring, ring-a-ding-ding, ring-a-ding-ding. Rick-a-dick-rick, rick-a-dick-rick. Ring-a-ding-a-ding-ding-dong. Rim, 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 rim.
She's got her own computer buddy, Dandy, an absolute goody two-shoes dressed in a tuxedo. An SOS call comes in from Planet Idea, who've been suffering under the tyrannical Garum dictatorship. Dandy warns her not to answer the call, but Rim threatens to return him to the computer store, and they prepare for a crash landing. And now we're Rim, beset by giant ants. Being a cosmic hunter, Rim has access to psi abilities instead of spells, but unlike you, she's able to use them at any time, making her a much better hunter. Right now, she's got a single spell called Crush, which calls down lightning. I suspect it's actually meant to be called Crash? The manual says it compresses space, so maybe that's just the animation they had on hand. I took a look at the working designs manual just to be sure, and that calls the spell Klesh. So, well, who knows. Seems like not a lot has changed over the past 20 years. Here's a bunch of posters for Cosmic Fantasy 3. This gal asks if Rim is from far away, and even though she knows she has to maintain Prime Directive, she immediately spills the beans and says she's from another planet before getting flustered. She's really not good at this. This chapter sees Rim link up with different members of the Idea Resistance, namely the unfortunately named twin sisters Jila and Sheila, to scupper Garum's plans, which is still kidnapping random girls, even though he's already got Larla. Here's Nova's mansion where all the girls be at. I do like the nightfall ambience here, with the glow of the windows reflected onto the soil. It's really moody, and probably the nicest thing we've seen so far. The soldiers are planning to do some really unsavory things to the girls here, and I don't like it one bit. We passed another crashed spaceship on the way here, and who should we find caged up in the mansion but Nyan? No, that's not Nyan. That's his son Pico, or Pick, according to this script. Look at this cute little crying kitten. How could we leave this guy in here? He was searching for his dad, but was attacked by space pirates, crash-landed, and ended up in this here cage. But before we can free him, Nova turns up. A nasty little frogman. He transforms into a very unintimidating little gargoyle gremlin. But holy cow, he does so much damage. I can't do anything against him, and I end up deaded, losing quite a bit of progress. Unable to bear facing the grind at this point, I lumped it, alternating healing, casting spells, and restoring MP, and I did manage to beat him, and then Pick joins us, tearful even in his portrait. He's got no weapons, no items, and a few spells, the most useful of which is Retition, which fully restores one character's hit points. I let the gals out and we head back to town, and the mayor's like, wow, girl saved us, gosh. This guy's crying about Sally in the pub, and Sally's right outside. You know what, let's stay out of this one. Then we get this cutscene where Rim wants to take Pick home. A call comes in from Dandy at the ship. He tells us to come back, but his ship's in space and is being attacked? I thought we crash-landed, and I guess I really just don't know what's going on in this game. He ends the call, and the winds of loneliness blow over us. The chapter ends, and Pick breaks through the black screen. Great stuff. For Chapter 3, let's catch back up with Van the Man, last seen when Garam sent him 20 years into the future. Garam has since become President King of the entire planet, and to add insult to injury, he bulldozed Van's house to build his castle. Pretty rude. Garam has a surprisingly high approval rating with the general populace. Sounds like he pretended to eliminate all the horrible monsters wandering the overworld, but it'd be more convincing if, the world wasn't still covered in horrible monsters. We do find a few pockets of people who hate Garam, but instead of explaining how he's made life worse, they all just talk about how life was better exactly 20 years ago, because that's how this game is written. When we enter the town of Bra, we spy Pick being taken away by soldiers, so our two parties are about to convene. Van tells off the soldiers for picking on cats and girls, which I kind of like that. We fight them, and one of them is a dang skeleton, which you think would also hurt Garam's approval ratings. Pick thanks us and explains he's an alien to Van, who doesn't really seem to care. Pick asks us to rescue Rim, and we get a great cutscene here where Van tries to imagine what an alien girl looks like. Pick, on the other hand, has this weird BDSM fantasy. Now, you're not going to believe this, or you're definitely going to believe this, but at the tail end of the last chapter, I took Pick to the armory for some equipment so he'd stand a fighting chance. I spent all my money on weapons and armor for him, and now that Pick has joined Van, his inventory has been completely wiped, leaving him nude and me penniless. I guess I didn't learn my lesson from Annie. We make it to the top of the dungeon where Rim's being held, and get another salacious cutscene of Rim tied up in a high school gym outfit, about to get whipped by a man. The would-be oppressor here is Zan, a guy with a really silly hat who recognizes Van, maybe because their names rhyme. It makes me wish Jan was here for the hat trick. He has the same battle sprite as Nova, but he's a lot easier to deal with. Rim and Pick hug it out while Van tries to look all moody and cool about it. But this marks where Rim joins the party, and we're all together. With a party of 3 varied characters, we have a bit more versatility when it comes to combat, but most of the time things still boil down to a whackin' and a healin'. Hello, Borscht. Rim eventually learns Roddy, an all-target full heal spell, which, although expensive, ended up being a regular lifesaver in the game's back half. Our next stop is this ice cave full of hellhounds, I guess because you'd never expect them to be there. The basement is a pitfall maze that makes me furious looking at it. Out of the cave, we reach Ein Village, named after the goddess Ein. Everybody wants King Garam to visit because they're idiots. A guy in this house tries to give us info about the game's underexplained magic stones, and makes a columns joke that doesn't quite land. Oh, hey. The shrine in Ein has another goddess trial for us to complete, not unlike Darba's. This time, it's a Godstickle course. This is a path where attempting to pass through the wrong door triggers a battle and sends you back. It's not too much of an issue, but I really wish there was some kind of tell instead of just trial and error, but Cosmic Fantasy 2 just cannot resist wasting the player's time. With this trial complete, we're asked to complete another trial at a goddess cave in the north. We're going back and forth, up and down, talking to the 5 goddess statues here, before the final statue gives us some key items and makes us find our own way out. Then, we're off to link up with the Resistance, and we have to traverse this mountain teleporter maze, with cave entrances bouncing you all over the map to different spots. I opt to avoid them and make for the top, where there's a cave with a locked door. Once you figure out how the caves link up, or if you use a map on GameFAQs like I did, you can actually use them to cover greater distance on the map in less time with less encounters. The secret here is that one of the caves around the midpoint... Oh, buddy, you're walking right in front of my script. I can't see. Oh. Oh my gosh. Are you my Pico? Are you my Nyan? The secret here is that one of the caves around the midpoint leads to a real cave with an injured dude in it. He's with the Resistance. His name's Milan, and he's our new ally. Milan is a rather unremarkable melee character. His average stats, lack of spells, and plain Jane sprite suggest he won't be with us for long. So obviously we head back to the blocked door, and indeed, Milan unlocks it, escorts us to the Resistance camp, and promptly leaves the party. Check out Garum Gestapo deserter Adol here. Nobody really has much to say other than welcome to camp. Milan's just hanging out in a tent. We meet his significant other, who's just identified as woman. Jeez. Looks like Jila and Sheila made it here. The Resistance commander's welcoming, but doesn't give us any new info. I go back to Milan, and he tells me to check in with the commander one more time, and when I talk to him a second time, he sends me back to Milan's tent to go to bed. Pick wakes up crying in the night because some assassins are here. I don't blame him, but the assassins are 2 bats and a marionette. Jila suspects there's a traitor in the midst. The commander says they've captured a suspect ready for execution. It's poor old Adol here. But hey, we're media savvy, so we know he's probably not the true culprit. We check in with the suspect, and he hands over a letter to Garum's Admiral Ibado. Get a load of this smoking gun. Dear Admiral, we've taken over the Resistance and nobody knows. Idiots. Ha ha ha. Signed, the commander. Of course. The commander comes out from behind his desk, so you know he means business. His officers are in on it too. Rim scolds them, and he says, you'll understand when you're older. Jila busts in to join the battle, and we fight the same commander boss sprite from the start of the game. Jila's pretty weak, but sometimes she scores a critical hit. The commander's pretty tough, on the other hand, capable of hitting for around 150 damage. Hick does 0 damage here, so he's on designated healing duty. It's not the worst boss fight. It's simple, but not mindless, although it does take forever. Adol thanks us for saving him and tells us about a ship. Watch out for this guy, he's got really bad luck with ships. Jila comes along for the next leg of the journey. On our quest for a ship, we fend off a gang of ghost knights along the way, still collecting taxes for their long-deceased feudal lord. We gotta pass through their very nasty castle. The finish line's right in front of your face, but if you're not careful, you'll fall into an invisible pitfall and be forced to circumvent a sewer full of monsters to get back to where you were. And then you might fall in another pit and do it all again. I like these pink ghosts. I don't like this knight named Genocide. That feels really bad in 2024. We fight the lead ghost, who's just a bat, and a bat isn't a ghost. But Jila says it's Garum's magic waking the dead, and she says we better beat him up or we'll be swimming in ghosts. It's kind of a fun idea. When we finally reach the port, the place is under control of Admiral Ibado, and the townsfolk seem to really love him. The Admiral's having a party, but it seems to be invite only. The lady standing next to the town sign gives us hers because she can't get off her shift of standing next to this sign. Rim says the plan is to steal a ship during the party. But are there going to be ships at the party? Well, it turns out Ibado's house is on the dock, which is being guarded by soldiers. So we go mingle for now. Hey, this is no party. There's nobody here. We go see Ibado, and it was a trap to get us in here and kill us. Why were we the only ones not invited? The Admiral's actually some kind of toad, with his nasty tongue lolling all about like a horny Kermit. We fend him off long enough to make a run for the harbor, and it turns out all of his soldiers are zombies. You'd think the townsfolk would notice something's up, but I talked to this lady, and she turns out to be a weasel, which is apparently a griffin with a snake head. I don't think that's what a weasel is, but I guess all the townsfolk are monsters. Well, I'm going to the inn to save. There's a soldier out front trying to bar our entrance, but I just diagonally walk behind him and have a rest. You can always rely on the capitalist motivations of innkeeps. We head back to the port to fight the Admiral again, who this time transforms into an armless, bosomy dragon. Look at his gut. Wait, his real name is Monster Beto? You know, this game is something else. The 4 of us handle him, commandeer his ship, and we're on to the final chapter. I do like this nice ship cutscene. Look at those waves. Look at that adventure boy, filled with determination. On to Chapter 4, where we cut to space to catch up with Nyan, Monmo, Yu, and Saya. Saya seems to have adjusted to space life without any issue. But an emergency call comes in, summoning our crew to Idea. Nan sees Pick on the screen and gets all excitable. Here comes the cavalry. Back to Van and the crew. Garam's gang is here to greet us at the dock. This is actually a brutal boss battle, and even though we were fully healed after our battle with the Admiral, we haven't had a chance to save, so you've got to deal with these dweebs back to back if you die. This fella named Doba shows up in his apron as we try to leave town. He's with the Resistance, and he came to warn us that Garam's men were going to ambush us at the port, but he's a little late there. You had one job, Doba. Doba tells us to meet the commander of the Resistance. I point myself in the direction of their headquarters, but the overworld is full of fire-breathing hydras, necromancers, ghosts, and I have to go back to town to rest multiple times. Check out the smile on this lich, though. I do finally make it, a hole in the ground that leads to a field of flowers. This is where Jila exits the party, but weirdly says to Rim, if you don't want to end up like me, you do well to learn how to be a lady. It's an awful coda for a warrior woman to go out on. I take a nap in her tent, and she gives Rim her sword, the Wing Edge. Some mixed messages from this game. We meet the commander, and it's Jan! He's got gray in his hair because it's been 20 years. He asks us to help him defeat Garam, and Van says no. He has to go his own way and defeat him alone. We knew Van was an idiot, but he's also kind of a jerk, too.
It's my lucky charm. Get that thing away from me. It gives me the creeps.
But apparently Annie wants to see us. She kept getting older, but we stayed the same age. Jan's daughter Claire will be our guide. Cool hair, Claire. She seems a bit beefy, holding the same sword that Jila gifted to Rim. Now we're traversing another cave with decapitated heads and trolls. The monsters here are absolutely brutal, and they usually get the advantage on me. A whole golem? I really don't like that. We reunite with Annie, who's all grown up. They break out the cutscene for her massive tatas, which everybody goes gaga over. Then she starts crying because she loves Van. Annie tells us that Darba died, but we already knew that because we were there. But he's left his memories in this sweet tart. He tells us Garam became immortal through Larla's power, which we also already knew. We'll never beat him, but we have to beat him. Alright. Her pendant is the key. It appears that Larla is half human, half goddess, but I don't think we ever find out who her mother is. This line from Annie about how Larla's royal family are descended from goddesses kind of makes me think of how Emperor Hirohito said that he was descended from Amaterasu. Huh. Claire has some news. Firstly, Larla is known as Queen Larla, and secondly, she's in a place called Lemlai Ka. And then she leaves so Annie can join. And it's for the best, because Annie's much more useful in battle than Claire. Hey, remember that waterfall where they told us to come back in 20 years? Well, there it is again, and 20 years have passed, haven't they? So here we are at Laser Village. Get it? Shin Nihon Laser Soft? This is the dev room, a staple of 90s RPGs, where we can see how badly the staff were treated while working on this game. A rowdy guy at the entrance says the place is a sham, so we're off to a good start here. This sales rep wants us to buy the CD-ROM version of Valis 3. Honestly, I'd recommend the Sega Genesis version, it's better. Sanae here wants to celebrate Satomi's birthday on November 28th. I'm suspecting this is her child. Giz is worried that he looks like a gizmo and accuses you of not liking him. Classic nice guy behavior. Some awful guy offers to sell us some modern firearms in exchange for one of our women. A lady named Junpei with a recolored Saya sprite offers us a quickie. If you say yes, it seems like she climaxes in a single text box, and if you say no, she rubs one out in front of you. Thank you, Cosmic Fantasy. At first, I worried if this was a real member of staff who was essentially being sexually harassed by their fellow devs, but doing a little digging, this almost certainly seems to be a guy named Junpei who's getting his jollies from these kind of jokes. A lot of this stuff seems to be non-sequiturs, in-jokes, things lost in translations, and references to other Telenet games. A child named Supple Suzuki wants to do it with Noriko. I don't want to assume, but it seems pretty clear what that is. A recolored van named Pan threatens to kill us as a joke. And here we have our classic. Toshimon says, I'm beat. I've been sleeping here a lot and the wife's been upset. The games industry never changes. Lalachio here is a member of the S&M Club. Let your freak flag fly in this children's game, sure. And the Elder, Boss, tasks us with finding the missing floppies. Apparently it's in the basement of an eastern house where this guy suspiciously says there is no floppy. I cash it in with the boss who wants to know what's on it, and we won a prize. If we send a postcard to Telenet, we could be one of 50 winners. Amazing. Get it off quick now. Alright, that's enough fun. Time to finish this. We're back at one of the earlier towns, which has become the seat of Garam's power. But first, there's a pretty big glitch here. Credit to Guardmaster at GameFAQs for discovering this. If you step on this nondescript world map tile, you will warp to the Algernon with you, Saya, Monmo, and Nyan congratulating you and admonishing Rim. Oh, this Red Book audio issue. This messes up your party composition, and also puts you at a level disadvantage for the final dungeon. Pick is meant to be replaced with Saya here, but he stays in the party and she's absent, so we're not doing this. There's a kid hanging out in the pub here, but he just hits me with the dots. I try to go to the castle, and I can't get in. Eventually, I find myself surrounded by soldiers. The little pub boy comes to the rescue, and this is almost certainly you wearing a cape. Rim recognizes his abilities as those of a psychic cosmic boy. This guy loves that we beat up the soldiers, so he offers to sneak us into the castle by hiding us in a crate of beer. We get this voiced cutscene of a black screen where everybody's goofing around, grabbing boobs. And now we're in the basement. Maids are wandering around the grounds like it ain't no thing, despite the dungeon music. Apparently Larla's not home, and she might be back on Clan Island because she doesn't feel well. These maids lulled me into a false sense of security, but of course the place is overrun with monsters. Rocks and space pirates? How do the staff even work here? Hey Buster, don't you mess with me. I still don't get this game's battle calculations. These foes will do anywhere between 2 and 80 damage, seemingly arbitrarily. Here's another robot, uncomfortably named Gash. I don't like that. At the top of the castle, we find not Garam, but Hagen and Vega. They're talking about their plan to build robots under Clan Island, and how they don't want the Commonwealth Police and the Cosmic Hunters to catch wind of it. That's the first time we've heard the police mentioned in this game. Anyway, the long and the short of it is they're space pirates trying to turn the entire planet into a pirate's cove. Time for a boss battle against Hagen, a jumpy guy in khakis with a morning star. He hits really hard, but mercifully one target per turn, so healing isn't a complete crisis. I try casting a defense down spell on him, and it doesn't seem to do anything. I try casting a defense up spell on the party, and it says it has no effect. Great. The battle takes forever, but then Vega calls us a bunch of slobs and gets in a mech suit shaped like his own face. Yu comes to the rescue and replaces Pick in the party, and we fight the Vega machine. Man, they don't even heal us before this. Yu's the strongest character in the party by far, and his Psycho Bomb spell can paralyze the Vega machine for a single turn. I cast Detect, the critical hit spell from the first game, and it has no effect at all, and I hate this so much. This is more or less the exact same battle we just fought against Hagen, but with a different sprite, and for some reason the game unequipped Rim's rare queen and gave her a weaker sword in another slot, all without input from me. Great. After quite the slugfest, we do manage to beat the Vega machine, and Vega just walks off all grumpy. And now we're where the accidental warp tile took us, meeting the cast of the first game. Yu and Saya join the party, and we take the Algernon as a submarine to Clan Island. The finale is at hand. Pick gives us some free ampules, which fully heal HP and MP, like his father before him. They're an endless supply, so I fill up the inventory. Oh, look at all of Yu's super bombs! Saya was already loaded too! They're basically giving it to us here. Back where it all began, we disembark and head for Garam's island home. Yu and Saya absolutely dominate in combat, as we fight Hawkmen, robots, and even the freaking Necronomicon just bumbling around the world map. What is that? That is not an ice golem. It does tickle me how short Yu is compared to the rest of the party. Just look at that little guy go. I wander into a nondescript mountain cave, and it's a techno dungeon full of robots and ghost foxes called eels. Oh, hey, Persona. Oh, for heaven's sake. Look at this teleporter nonsense. There's a tile in the basement that heals your HP but not MP, so if you need to grind, now's the time. MP's probably best spent on healing anyway. Okay, game, you got me. That's a pretty good enemy sprite. We come across a floor of V's. V for Vega. I prepare for a big battle, but randos attack me on the way. There he is, ready to fight. Garam is Vega's pawn or something? Well, we fight him in all of his 80s space pirate glory. It's kind of a cool costume design. He puts up a real fight, but luckily we're filled up to the brim with ampules. I toss one of Yu's super bombs, and it does a little bit more damage than his standard melee attack. Vega is still a tough customer, and he takes a lickin', but it's a slightly easier battle as Yu and Saya are so strong. But we kick his butt and take home the prize of 10,000 experience points. I guess bosses do give EXP after all. Everybody levels up, cops a free heal. I get a saber from a chest, which is somehow better than my lightning sword. Back on the world map, we head north, braving the robots and their scorpion pals, and find a lone house in the forest. Saya feels a sadness, and we meet an older woman named Al. She says Larla doesn't feel well and isn't taking visitors, but when Van identifies himself, Al lets him in. Everybody else has to wait by the door. Larla's in bed, looking like she hasn't aged a day in 20 years. Van says they'll be together after he beats Garam, and Larla hands over her pendant without a word. Man, if Larla and her pendant are the key to Garam's power, he sure is being a little loosey-goosey allowing her to take her vacation with Al. Now, you'd imagine these two lovebirds would have more to say to each other after decades apart, but it's a very quick exchange with no feeling behind it. I took a quick spin around the house to see if Larla had anything more to say, but she's not actually there. I don't know if this is a metaphor for her life fading away without her pendant, or just some wacky programming, but I'm suspecting the latter. It was actually foreshadowing. Anyway, instead we're left with Al, who lets us stay the night and save the game for the final time. Just north of Al's house is the Shura tree, where Van carved he and Larla's names as children. There's a vague sense of gravitas at being back at this sentimental spot, but the leaves rustle and you don't really get anything out of it. Further north, Death Castle is built right atop Van's hometown, which he does not remark upon. The castle has many floors and a basement sewer, none of which you need to visit unless you want to brave a bunch of random battles to get some consumable items. I don't, so I use a map to head to the throne room immediately. Logface? Now we're just getting silly. Death Castle teases you with empty treasure chests, which then drop you into a pitfall. I'm not even gonna capture this for you. If you fall down a floor, you have to traverse the entire sewer, and I am done with this game. We persevere, ignoring the empty chest traps, and we find Garam and his 4 eyes. Gloating that Larla gave him immortality and dark magic, he's gonna take over the whole galaxy. Yu's not having it. All the cosmic hunters say their piece.
その自由を奪うなんてこと絶対に許せない。
ガラム、俺は絶対に貴様を倒す。ラーラのために、そしてこのイデアに住むすべての人々のために。
We raise Larla's pendant, stripping Garam of his immortality, and here we go with the Flight of the Bumblebee boss music again. This is more or less the same as the battles against Vega and Hagen. Garam attacks one target per turn for about 2/3 of their health, whether we use defense up, attack down, or not. The game starts eating my inputs here, and sometimes I have to press the confirm button 4 times in a row for it to register. We beat Garam's butt without too much difficulty, and he transforms into this, buff Minotaur thing? No healing for us, our stat buffs are gone, and here we go again. I'm doing terrible damage against him, but this time defense down seems to actually work. With all the ampules and bombs in my inventory, this was a fairly easy battle of attrition. I beat his butt again, and he laughs and says Larla ain't coming back. When he dies, we get a little event where we get 50,000 EXP, which is useless because the game is over. Vega's ship takes off as he tries to escape. Dandy fires a beam to destroy Vega's ship and flies off. And we're back at Larla's summer home, so we head inside. Al greets us, as if for the first time. But we mention our name, and she goes to get a letter for us. As it turns out, Larla died of some kind of consumption disease a year ago, and I guess we were hanging out with her ghost. Van is crestfallen and sees a vision of Larla talking about how she just wanted to run through the fields and the countryside with him, eventually resting under the Shura tree together.
真っ青な空に浮かぶ白い雲、そよ風になびく緑の草原をあなたと一緒に駆け抜ける夢です。そして修羅の木の下で二人して懐かしい思い出話をするの。バン、私はもうあなたに会うことはできないでしょう。でもどうか悲しまないで。あなたはあなたらしくいつまでも夢を追い続けて生きていってほしい。だってそれが私の大好きだったバンの生き方なんですもの。
Van gets over it quickly and decides to be a Galaxy Adventure Boy along with you. He may have saved the day, but he didn't get the girl. Get a little epilogue here where Jan becomes president of the planet. We can walk around Death Castle, which is now a nice castle, and talk to some of our former party members in the throne room. But there's nothing else to do but leave. And leave we do, as Van piles into Rim's ship with the others. Everybody has a good laugh. Nyan says goodbye to Pick. They have an adorable hug. I don't know why Nyan is staying here on the planet. Oh, apparently he forgot he was supposed to leave too. A nice little callback to the first game's ending. And so, the two adventure boys head off at the speed of light in their own ships. And we get a city pop banger over the closing credits. And that's the Cosmic Fantasy Collection, a pair of games that will test the patience of the most seasoned JRPG sicko. Did people actually like these games in Japan at the time? Cosmic Fantasy 2 was pretty well received in America, so I suspect it's an Emperor's New Clothes situation of being dazzled by the PC Engine's anime art and limited voice acting. Completely lacking in depth with maximal grind, it's hard to see these two games as anything more than a cynical attempt to capitalize on the success of Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy without bringing anything new or exciting to the table. There is a distinct lack of vision here. Cosmic Fantasy genre contemporaries, even within Telenet's own stable like Tenchi no Uta, may not have the most engaging mechanics, but there is a clear sense of purpose and you can see what they were going for. I can't see that with Cosmic Fantasy. Shmuplations translated an interview with Ochi Kazuhiro from 1992 after the release of Cosmic Fantasy II, where, unbelievably, he says, RPGs like Cosmic Fantasy are not my forte. Too many of them are kinda shallow and lacking in any depth. Adventure games are my favorite genre. Buddy, you should have just made an adventure game. And I guess he kinda did with Cosmic Fantasy IV. This is actually a pretty revealing interview where Ochi describes his creative process. He just wanted to draw some cute characters, which Lasersoft then built a game around. Ochi and Telenet share the copyright, with Ochi only owning the character designs themselves. Whether or not he's tooting his own horn, he believes the games are popular for his character designs, rather than the gameplay and story. And like I said just before, he's almost certainly right. But look, don't get me wrong, I think it's great that Cosmic Fantasy 1 and 2 are available again. The games industry is notoriously terrible at preservation, so I'm happy to see even the stinkiest old Kusoge made available on modern platforms. But the Cosmic Fantasy Collection could have been so much more. Imagine if these were more carefully curated, with concept art, interviews, scans of promotional materials, just anything to showcase these games and their place in history. But instead we get these no-frills ports with unbearable translations at a prohibitively high price. Being a Switch exclusive, I have my doubts as to how long these games will even be preserved. We've seen how Nintendo treated the Wii U and 3DS eShops, and unless Edea start porting their work to PC, I fully expect Cosmic Fantasy Collection to essentially become lost media within the next decade. Anyway, you'll probably have just as much fun picking up a Japanese copy on eBay for $9.99. The vocab is very easy and probably good for learners, or you could just bumble through it. Or you could get this English copy of Cosmic Fantasy 2 for £250. No thank you, Dr. Orange Juicer. You know what? Let's just look at this American box art and reflect on the days of Lunchables, Squeeze-Its, and game rental shops. Well, you can rest assured I'll keep playing this garbage for the both of us. I can't wait to whine about Cosmic Fantasy Collection 2 with you in the near future. Thank you as always for watching my videos, and think about dropping me a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I know it's been a little bit of a gap between the last video and this one, but it's proven to be a little bit of a year for me. I'm hoping to be back on a tighter schedule from here on out, and next time I might even cover a game that I actually enjoy. Stranger things have happened. See you next time, folks. He hands over a letter to Garam's admirable... He hands over a letter to Garam's admirable... Oh my god. He hands over a letter to Garam's admirable... Admiral... Oh, why can I not say it? Garam's Admiral Ibado. God, that took me so many tries. Oops.